Happy Friday, everyone. My name is Nancy Chu. I am a PM coach and PM advisor. I'm very passionate in helping people become the PM that they want to be, and also very passionate in helping startups understand best practices when it comes to product management. And so when I first met Brett, I actually had a different topic in mind for this discussion. But after talking to him more, I realized not everyone has the same shared vocabulary when we're talking about product management. People talk about product thinking, but what does that mean? I want to talk about that today. My ideal outcome for this discussion is create shared vocabulary. So when we're introducing concepts on top of more concepts, we can use the same words when we're having discussions like this. So I want to approach today's agenda in the following order. Let's start with high-level definition of what product management means. And then we'll talk about what the product manager does. It's not necessarily one-to-one, because I want to talk about what that means. And I want to talk about product thinking because that is a term that is used quite often. So let's talk about what product thinking is and how it relates to product managers and how it relates to product management. And then, of course, we have to talk about product execution because that's how we make and build products and go to markets. After that, I want to answer some of the frequently asked questions that I've gotten in the past, followed by Q&A. But I just realized I forgot to tell you about my background. Okay, so I have about over a decade of experience in product management. And before product, I was in engineering for about 5 years. And when I was in engineering, I realized that I probably would be a better PM than an engineer. And so I found my way into product management. And I started in B2B enterprise. And then I did that for a few years and decided I want to try startups. So I went to a B2B startup that got acquired by Symantec. And then I went to my second B2B startup. It was a smaller startup and it eventually got sold to a competitor. And then I went to my third startup and that one eventually went IPO after a few years, after many years actually. And then I decided I wanted to try B2C. That's when I went to Meta. And then after that, I went to a smaller company at Roku. So as I reflect on this topic of product management, I'm trying to think back, okay, what does it mean in a B2B setting? What does it mean in a B2C setting, whether it's big company or small company? So with that, let's start with the definition of product management. And without reinventing the wheel, I picked my favorite definition. It's defined by Shreyas Doshi. He's one of the most prominent PM advisors today. So he defines it like this. It's the art, science, practice of these two things. The first one is making successful products. And two, making products successful. I'm going to say that again because it's similar but different. The first one, making successful products, and two, making products successful. So what's the difference? Well, the first one, making successful products, literally, it's making something out of nothing. So we're going from 0 to 1. And the second one, making products successful, we're making something that already exists more successful. So number 2 is about going from 1 to 10 or 10 to 100. That is when we're scaling after product market fit. So for today's discussion, it's more relevant to talk about number 1, the first aspect of product management, which is going from 0 to 1, making successful products. So you might ask, what does success mean? Well, typically, we talk about user adoption, user satisfaction, and some kind of business impact when we're thinking about success. It could be profit, revenue, market share, etc. So these are different elements and dimensions when we're measuring success in terms of products. And the other thing it's kind of a side note, but a very important one when we're defining what product management is, we have to understand it is a team sport. So think basketball, think soccer and football, don't think golf. It's a collaboration across the various team members.
Let me just say that here in the Bay Area, we are all thinking Warriors basketball right now.
Okay. Yes. So think Warriors and think basketball. In this team sport environment, we are harnessing the collective knowledge and skills of the entire team. So what does that mean? It means product management is everyone's job. It's not the product manager's job. The team sport, everyone has a stake. Everyone has to contribute, because with the collective knowledge, then we can have successful products. So you might ask, if that's everyone's job when it comes to product management, then what does a product manager do? Great question. Let's talk about responsibilities of the PM. Falls in two main buckets. The first one, they have to define the right product. And second, they have to work with the team to build it right. And it has to be done in this order and not the other way around. First, you define the right product, and then you build it with the team. So what does the right product mean? It has two dimensions, from the customer perspective and from the company perspective. So from the customer perspective, the right product has to solve the most important and unmet problems. If the problem is important, but it's already met, then it's not the right product for you. Or it's the other way around. If it's unmet, but it's not an important problem, again, it's not the right product for the customer because it's not important, even though it's unmet. But additionally, from the company perspective, the right product is a product that meets business goals and it helps a company differentiate. If you miss one of the two levers, then it kind of doesn't make sense anymore. Then the product is not right. If the product meets goals, but it doesn't differentiate, what does that mean? It means maybe for short term, it makes sense for the company, but it's not going to give you that long-term sustainable growth that you want. So to summarize, PM responsibility, top one responsibility is define the right product such that it makes sense for the customer and for the company. Let's use different words to look at the same concept. And again, my goal here is to establish common vocabulary. So when we're talking about this concept, people use different words, but you'll understand it's the same concept. So some people put it in these terms. First, we plan, and then we execute. And in that order, when we're planning, we're understanding why is it important, what's the problem, who are we solving this problem for, right? That's planning, and that's defining the right product. And then execution, which is number two, is the how are we going to build it, in what order, in what sequence, and when are we going to release. So PM responsibility falls under these two main buckets, and it has to be done in that order. Here's another vocabulary lesson. People sometimes use the term problem space and solution space, and this is probably my favorite words to use because it's very easy and it's short. So problem space and solution space. Again, in the problem space, we're all about exploring what problem are we solving. And the solution space is when we are solutioning and building. Let's take a look at this quote from Einstein. He said, if I were given 1 hour to save the planet, I would spend 15 minutes defining the problem and only 1 minute resolving it. So what does that mean? Einstein is right. Of course, he's Einstein. We want to spend more time understanding the problem before we jump into resolving it. And that is a huge part of the PM job when done right. So let's take a look at an example of what this means. Start with a problem space before we go into solution space. when we're in the problem space, let's use this example. Suppose the user is saying, I need to take notes. The solution could be pen and paper, it could be voice recorder, or it could be other things. So depending on what the problem is, the solution would look differently. And that is very important and why we always start with a problem. Here is another illustration. And again, we're just looking at the same concept with different words and different illustration to establish a common knowledge and common framework. We always want to start in the problem space before moving into solution space in this order. And in the problem space, we are swirling and we're going on this squiggly path, but we want to start here. This is where we swirl. But when we go into solution space, we want to go straight line, we want to go straight into it. We don't want to swirl in the solution space. That is very expensive and it's not a good use of time. And so start here, swirl and learn and observe, and then go straight into solution space. Hopefully not a lot of swirl in the solution space phase of the product. Here is another diagram that I think really highlights the importance of doing things in this order. So when we're in the problem space, we're trying to understand and observe. So what does observe mean? Let's take the taking notes example, right? The user is saying, I need to take notes. But let's observe that. Why are they saying that? Do they really need to take notes? What is the underlying need? What is the need that they're not saying? Well, what they're saying is, I feel there's something important. And if I don't take notes, I'm going to forget. And bad things would happen if I forget. So let's say I'm a student in Brett's class and Brett teaches very important concepts. If I don't take notes, I'm going to forget. And then I'm not a good student and I'm going to have these consequences and then this, and then this, and then this, and this, right? And so there's all kinds of feelings that the user is not saying. When we observe, then we know, okay, they're feeling anxious. There's worry, there's sense of, oh my God, if I don't do this and bad things would happen. Like that is where the observation comes in beyond what the user is saying. They're saying, I need to take notes, but that's not the real problem. So we need to observe. And once we observe, we're going to find out that there's a lot of issues and use cases on the table. That's where we need to converge onto having that one single point of view. Once you have that single point of view, and different users will have different pain points, and different members on a team would also have different opinions. So we converge on a single point of view, and then we solution. When we solution, we're going wide again. We're ideating, we're creating different versions of the solution, and then we prototype, and we converge again in the test, and then we launch. So this is one of my favorite illustrations of the space that we're in, and the space is defining what a product manager does. So this diagram illustrates what a PM is supposed to do. I want to pause here on the point of view portion of the diagram. This is where there's a lot of various opinions and priorities on the table, and the PM's job is to converge, get everyone to agree, including their own insight is also on the table. Everyone has an opinion and everyone is right, but how do we converge on a single point of view? This is the job of the PM, to get the entire team to agree before we solution. So now let's talk about the must-have skill sets and traits. Let's go back to the same diagram. Again, the common vocabulary is important. So in the problem space, when we're try to understand the problem and observing the user, this is where the PM needs to have deep user empathy of the user so we could understand the true problem behind the word. And then when we're trying to converge on that point of view, this is where the PM needs to have good influential skills, because there's so many different opinions we need to converge, and therefore the PM needs to influence. And then when we go into solution space, the PM needs to be extremely cooperative, because the PM doesn't do all the work associated with solutioning. PM can do some of the work, but not all the work. So in that phase, the PM needs to be extremely cooperative. And there is one more thing. Assuming the PM is not the founder, they have no authority, which means they have to influence others to get the work done because they work through other people. So those are some of the top traits that a PM needs to have, and they're must-haves. Without these traits, the PM would not be successful. So now let's think about product thinking. This is a term that is used a lot. It's all rooted in user empathy. And user empathy, like I mentioned before, it's about understanding what the user needs beyond the words that they're using. So understand their motivation. Let's take the taking notes example. I'm a student in Brett's class. Why am I saying I want to take notes? What is motivating me? Well, my motivation is I want to be a good student. I want to learn everything I can. And there are so many important points that are probably not in the handout, and I need to write it down, else I'm going to forget. And if I forget, then I feel like I'm not a good student, and then this, and then this, and this, right? So it goes on and on and on.
You guys remember about how I talked about to always ask why, when you're doing a customer interview and they say that something is a particular problem for them, always ask why.
Yes.
And that asking why opens up the solution set. And that's
absolutely.
Kind of yeah. Sorry,
so,
Nancy.
No, this is good. And we're trying to understand what they're trying to do. So when they're saying, I want to take notes, what are they trying to do? Well, they're trying to get the most value out of the class. They're trying to avoid forgetting something important. Maybe there's a quiz. I don't know. Maybe there's a project. And if they forget something important, there will be bad consequences. They're trying to avoid bad consequences, but they're not saying that, right? Until you go deep and dig deeper. And so number 3, what effect do I want them to have as the product? So if I were to create a good product that solves their issue, then how would the student feel? Now I'm going to feel very confident. I could be a good student, or I could feel a sense of ease. Now I feel like I'm in control, right? There's all these feelings and thoughts that they're not saying. So number 4, what do they need? So different students also have different needs. For me, let's say if I'm taking a class that is taught in Mandarin and I need to take notes, that will be very hard for me because I can't write Mandarin. So if the solution is pen and paper, it's not going to meet my needs. I can't use that product. So number 4 is really understanding the persona of the student or persona of the customer, and then figuring out any objections that they might have. I will definitely object to something where I can't do it. So if I have to write in Chinese, I can't, right? So what are they not saying? It's basically all the feeling that they're feeling. They're not saying it, but it's the job of the product manager or the founder or the person playing the PM role to figure out what the users are saying. So there's another famous example with Ford building a car. If he interviewed users, they would ask for a faster horse, right? So let's take that famous example. The user is probably asking for a faster horse, but what are they not saying? They're saying, I want to get from point A to point B in a faster way, in a more effortless way, where I don't need a staff, I don't need to raise horses, I don't need a carriage, right? They're probably not saying a lot, but it's the job of the person who's responsible for having good product thinking to figure it out. So product thinking is rooted in user empathy. Why is that important? Because once your product is rooted in user empathy with good product thinking, then you're more likely to achieve your desired outcome. What is the desired outcome? It's when your products are built in such a mindful way that users are emotionally connected to it. So I remember this was maybe 2 decades ago. I bought my mom a digital voice recorder. 2 decades ago, people were still using tape recorders, but her tape was getting stuck. She had to rewind, fast forward, and the tape would get stuck. And then she was taking class at the time, and then she would miss certain important parts of the class, and she would get frustrated. But when I gave her the digital recorder, now it's more effortless. Now she doesn't have to rewind the tape and fast forward the tape, and nothing would get stuck. Now she is emotionally connected to the product because it gave her that sense of ease. It made her feel confident as a student. And why is emotional connection important? When we feel an emotional connection with a product, we become loyal customers. And why is that important? Was because then we become loyal to the brand. And so in the market, when there are competitors, and there will always be competitors, you need to have the loyal customer base who have brand loyalty. So they stick to you despite the market changing, despite competitors, etc. And to do that, to have loyal customers, the product needs to resonate on an emotional level with them. And that is why, coming back to product thinking, why is it so important to root everything in customer empathy and user empathy is so that your product becomes the mindful product that people are resonating with. And that is how you have long-term loyal customer base. Great, so all of that is all about problem space. Let's talk about solution space, product execution. So remember, when we have the problem already identified, the next step is now we have to prioritize the different use cases with the team. The key word here is we as in the product manager has to do it with the team to form the roadmap. The product manager does not come up with a roadmap on their own. This is a collaborative exercise with the rest of the team. And remember, unless the PM is the founder, they have no authority. So how do they get the work done? They work through others with their influential communication. And so when they're building this roadmap, the PM probably has their own agenda, but they have to influence other people so that we converge on a roadmap that everyone agrees to across different functions. And this has to be done with the PM's influential communication skills. So when we're talking about getting the work done through others, it's not just engineering, it's the entire team. The entire team needs to understand the vision and the strategy. This includes sales, marketing, UX, research, engineering, data, QA, and support. Every team would have a different roadmap, but they all need to converge. And it's the PM's job to make sure that alignment is there. Without that alignment, you wouldn't see a successful product. So FAQ. Now that we understand the problem space, and notice I spent most of the time talking about the problem space and only a little bit of time talking about solution space. That's because the problem space is a lot more crucial. So I'm often asked, doesn't the founder just define the problem space and not the PM in the startup scenario? And yes, absolutely. The founder typically performs a PM role. They translate the vision into strategy and roadmap that aligns with the business goals. That is true. But as the company grows, product management will take more time away from the founder. They will no longer have the capacity to do every aspect of the PM job. So in that case, the follow-up is, can an engineer handle product management? Well, absolutely, yes, they can if they have strong product thinking and they have the capacity, and they have the desire to do all those things mentioned above, including what user empathy, that is product thinking. Do they have the desire to work on their influential skills to converge the team when there's a lot of different opinions? Does the engineer want to do that? And do they have the capacity? If yes, then absolutely the engineer can handle product management. But if they cannot do all those things, and now you need someone else to kind of handle the product management, is it more expensive? Is it too expensive for startups? Well, it depends, because if you don't need a full-time PM, then yes, it would be too expensive. Maybe you just need a part-time PM. In this case, you can consider a fractional CPO or a PM consultant, depending on what your needs are. And fractional CPO is someone who is very senior, who works part-time for your startup. And a PM consultant works on projects that are well-defined. Now, the PM consultant doesn't have to be super senior. They could be mid-level, and they could do the job well, as long as the project is very well-defined, because they work on a time-bound engagement with the startup. So these are the other options that are on the table that can be considered if the product management function needs someone else to fill that, and that someone is not already part of the company. So if you do decide that you want to implement a product management function in the startup, how do you do it? Well, here the important principle is the PM has to play to the strength of the team and fill gaps, because again, it's a team sport. PM is part of the team. And so that means the PM's work is different across companies and across teams. It really depends on the DNA of the team and what the team needs. So if you are to hire someone, whether full-time or part-time, step one is to look inward and assess what your team needs. What are your strengths and weaknesses? Then dependent on that, you want to hire a PM that complements the team. So in the case where the founder is the PM, oftentimes founder has a vision and they translate it for the team. But sometimes the vision is so grand, so innovative, so net new, it's unimaginable. It is sometimes hard to translate concretely. In that case, the founder can also hire a PM who is very good with the craft, but not so good with the vision, to then do the translation, because sometimes the vision is just so out there.
Nancy, thank you very, very much.
Yeah, thank you, Brett, for having me.
Really been great. I really appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure.
So guys, you can connect with Nancy on LinkedIn, and sure she'd be happy. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks again, Nancy.
Bye.
See you guys. Bye.
Thank you.